Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. Again, this is Thursday, January 29th, 2026 at 1:02 in the afternoon. So we were going to come back to H512. We had someone else that wanted to testify, but haven't been able to get in touch with them. So I think we'll go right to H639 if he happens to show up, then we can take his testimony or bring him in another day. Todd, if you'd like to join us.
Not quite prepared to jump on the Zoom, so I'm going to do that very quickly so I can show the presentation I put together for you all. Give me go to Grace's email. I'm missing them. There we go. Great. Mute. Thank you. Good morning, afternoon. Good afternoon again.
Yay.
Good day. That's easier. I should just go with the neutral. Todd Delos, Assistant Attorney General at the Attorney General's Office, here to talk about H639, which is the Genetic Information Privacy Act. And I'm gonna, with your permission, just walk through a brief PowerPoint presentation. I want to, of course, the way this lays out, I can't reach. Actually show the Zoom information is blocking the presentation information. So let me. Okay. There we go. Sorry to have you walk through my technical inabilities.
All right, we all want right at some point.
So I want to start by thanking you for taking up the bill. I think Rep. Shai did a really nice job kind of presenting the human side of this bill. I think it's really encouraging to see not only this committee's interest, continued interest in data privacy, of course, but this specific element of data privacy. And the elements of, and the number of folks, I should say, who are also co-sponsoring this bill. I think Rep. Shai indicated it was a tripartisan sponsorship, which is wonderful. I don't need to talk too much about the importance of data privacy to this group in the digital age. It does take on a little bit more concern from the point of view of the Attorney General's office when we talk about genetic data. The quote that I've got up there from Professor Richards, right? Genetic data is not just data about people. And there, right, we think about how important it is, Social Security information, health data, location data, and the like. Genetic data is people. And the genome, that's, what does it mean? Our genome is immutable. We cannot change it. And when that data gets out, as this committee knows well, there's no really putting that genie back in the bottle. As Rep. Shai indicated, the genesis of this bill is really the 23andMe data breach and subsequent bankruptcy. And so I just want to take a few minutes to walk the committee kind of through our perspective, the AG's perspective on that experience. First was a cyber attack on 23andMe that resulted in a data breach. The rough figures are, it was really about 14,000 accounts, but what's really important is the way the data was interconnected, and this is really talking about what genetic data can do. There were nearly 7 million, it was I think 6.9 million accounts that were impacted by the data breach because of all those interconnected family trees and the like. So again, really demonstrating why this data can be extremely powerful and potent. Fast forward about a year and a half, 23andMe sought bankruptcy protection. The AGO issued a consumer alert. I think folks probably saw that. That's what got Rep Shai involved. Provided steps to delete accounts, gave information about how to destroy genetic samples. And what's important here is there were a lot of, not only was it a multi-step process, but they were so inundated with the number of requests that it was really hard for the company to actually comply with all the requests to delete and destroy data. And it took quite a bit of voluntary work between the AGO, multiple AG offices, and 23andMe to actually carry through that data deletion and destruction of material where consumers wanted it. So that intervention was also happening in court, right? So Vermont was part of a group of attorneys general who got status in the bankruptcy filing and filed basically what was a set of objections to the proposed sale of 23andMe, because the states took the position that the sale of genetic data, the sale of the company, any transfer of the company, including its assets of genetic data and genetic samples, was really a transfer of genetic data as well. And so you can see kind of, I just pulled a couple paragraphs out, but really looking at the unprecedented compilation of this highly sensitive data, and really the combination of genetic identity and phenotypic data, both of which are covered by 639, really distill the danger of letting this kind of information out there, getting transferred. And again, looking at kind of how it can be used, the challenges it presents, and the real damage it can do to individuals when it is allowed out. As part of the case, the bankruptcy court hired an expert, an ombudsman, Professor Richards, whose quote I put there at the top of the slideshow, who produced, as you can see at the top of this slide, a 211-page report on consumer privacy related to this bankruptcy. And the language I flag here is just an example of what people do when they get access to this data. These are largely bad actors, right? This was a hack that this data was released on, but it still flags the kind of information that's out there and available if it were allowed just into the marketplace. So, as I said, the state sought to prevent the sale of 23andMe assets, including the genetic material and the genetic data, and arguing that the sale was an unauthorized sale of the genetic data, and certainly without consumer consent or really consumer foreknowledge. At the same time, the states were negotiating with a potential successor business. And through those negotiations with that successor business, the states established an agreement that basically provided a lot of the data privacy protections we felt were really important for this information, both the samples again and the data. And through that voluntary agreement, we felt like there was a good degree of protection. That became really important because the court rejected the state's objections. And basically the court said, no, the sale's the sale and it's fine. Fortunately, the sale was to this company that we had already negotiated agreement with. So we had a contract, basically, for lack of a more artful term, an agreement with the successor company that continues to protect that consumer data and privacy information. But absent that negotiated agreement, and we would take the position that we could have sued for that, and we could have sought certain protections under the Consumer Protection Act that could have got us to the same place. But of course, that would have required a lot of litigation, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of court engagement. That's why we're looking for changes in the law to address this kind of element. I just flagged the bottom two bullets there, right, we continue to have an interest in the bankruptcy because 23andMe still has some assets left, and we're looking for some kind of recovery on the penalties and other elements that are, we believe, owing to the state. But it's also important that I there are no damages in that lawsuit for any individual consumers. So how does 626 respond to that? Rick already walked you through it. I don't want to belabor it too much, but I just wanted to highlight kind of the areas that dovetail with what happened in the 23andMe case. First, it requires a lot of information for consumers in plain language. It requires prominent placement of information for consumers on the collection of data, how the data security works, and deletion practices. And it helps consumers understand what is lawful data sharing within this space. Consumer consent is also really important. That was a question that came up during the walkthrough, and I just highlighted. I don't know if you can actually read it. It's hard for me to read the highlighted language on my screen, but it is as drafted. 626 is 639. 626 is down the hall. 639, very different bill. 639 requires express consent on each one of these decision points. So I think it was you, Rep. Booten, who were sort of like, is it one big, long 50-page check the box and agree to everything? And at least the way I read the statute, it's not. It's an individual consent for each step along the way. Is that a lot of check boxes and a lot of agreements? Yes. Is it important for consumers to have that level of engagement and be able to determine what they're agreeing to? We think yes as well. So it's, again, it's consent for the collection and storage. It's consent, these are examples, consent for use beyond the primary purpose. It's express consent for the transfer of the data, which we think is extremely important, and a very simple revocation of consent process. That we think is also really important. Not a multi-step opt-out after the fact, but something as simple as the way you went in. There's also greater data protection. I won't go into this too much, but we're going to continue to see data breaches. We're going to continue to see bad actors attempting to infiltrate. We do the best we can by requiring industry where they hold sensitive data to meet important standards. I would flag the second 2 points here. One is giving the consumer access to their own data needs to be fairly simple, and the ability to delete their account entirely is really important. The third one there is also important, right? A lot of these companies, there may be the front-end company and then they hire a lab to do the actual testing. That's a service provider. That transfer is contemplated within the agreement that you're making with whatever company you're getting your genetic data tested by. That's carved out in the law. It's an appropriate transfer. But that third-party service provider can't take the data they get from you or develop from your sample and combine it with other... Oh, did I lose you? No, good. Things that are popping up here aren't popping there. It's really I just want to flag that kind of data combination, which you all have talked about in other contexts, is included in this bill. There's also anti-discrimination language. I think that came up in the discussion of the walkthrough. So GINA is the Genetic Information Non-Disclosure Act, or Non-Discrimination Act. That really focuses on health insurance and employment non-discrimination. This is a little broader, and it also it engages directly with the genetic testing company to sort of say, people aren't going to get a higher level of service in order to waive rights under the law. Finally, this just came up, so I put that last 2 bullet points there. The direct-to-consumer testing company can't disclose the consumer's information to insurance companies or employers. But I want to be clear, that's the relationship that the consumer has with the testing company. The consumer may have a different relationship with, for example, a life insurance company. This doesn't regulate the consumer to life insurance transaction. That life insurance company may require disclosure of lots of information, engagement with health records, et cetera. This bill doesn't touch that consumer to insurance company relationship. It's the genetic testing company to insurance company relationship that it does prohibit. So enforcement, I think, is also an important point, especially in the data privacy space. There's a simple crossover, as you have in a lot of your bills, and it has an Act 63. I think it's almost exactly word for word like Act 63, which is the Age Appropriate Design Code, provides for AGO enforcement, considers this a violation of Title 9, Chapter 63. And again, provides the ability for individuals to protect the core information about themselves, information that can't be changed. So that's where we stand on the genetic data privacy piece. I think another question that came up during the walkthrough was sort of how would this dovetail with a broader Genetic Data Privacy Act, or sorry, Data Privacy Act? I think it dovetails really well, but I would say similar in the consumer protection space, and we could look at H512 and ticket reselling, right? The position of the AGO is a lot of the practices that are of concern in ticket reselling are deceptive, unfair practices in the market that we could go after under existing law. That said, the specificity of 512 provides additional tools and additional safeguards for consumers. That's how we feel about 639 as well. A broad Data Privacy Act is going to really help and support consumers broadly. Genetic data privacy, we feel like, is both urgent and specific enough to require a little bit more focus. So I'm happy to answer questions. I'm going to close this unless people want to see the slides.
Questions for Todd? Any?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And like, yeah, I'm fully supportive of this and super appreciate it, and know that also that it can like lay on top of other things, and so that's awesome. So, I did reach out to Neil Richards, who was quoted on your first slide, who was the consumer ombudsman for the 23andMe case, just for like expertise of like their thoughts on language and all that kind of stuff. So the recommendations, which I shared with Todd, but not the rest of the committee yet, is page 6, line 5, biometric data, with the suggestion that that is defined because it wasn't defined in the bill. And so I would love to see that definition match what we passed in kids code. So that's, and also that is what is in the comprehensive, so that everything is aligned. Page 11, line 16, changing biometric samples to biological samples. So there's not confusion there. Page 11, line 20, changing, well, I guess this depends on if biometric is then, if you agree to defining it, maybe that suggestion of changing, they had a suggestion of changing biometric data since it wasn't defined to mean just genetic data. But if we add biometric, then that would be null. And then page 9, line 2, inherent contextual uses. They just kind of flagged that it might be a potentially vague term and it might be worth defining for clarity. And I think that somewhat goes into like, we'll often use the inferred data. That is like people can make assumptions based on the data, but it's not actually the data itself. So they kind of have like a loophole there. So, yeah.
I mean, having not dug into the recommendations that you sent fully, I think they broadly look totally congruent with what we would like to see. I especially like the focus on closing loopholes around inferences in the genetic data. Because I think genetic data, I think there is an argument that you can't actually de-identify genetic data because you can take the name off and the address and everything else, but it doesn't, it is who you are. Probably more so than all those other identifiers. Yeah. Not to get too philosophical about what makes us who we are, but I do think that's an absolutely important and appropriate space to look at some additional language.
Questions?
We've gone on longer if you want.
Okay. We'll have more testimony on this next week. We'll see where we are. So I think that we haven't heard from our other. Okay, so we'll go offline till 2 o'clock. Maria will be in to go over the Bird's Amendment on page 648.